Fang Yuan and she had been sworn enemies in marriage for 5 years. During these 5 years, he drove luxury cars. He entered the cold storage. He dragged her back home. It seemed like they were constantly at odds, but in reality, it was full of deep affection. However, on Fang Yuan's birthday, he was stabbed 33 times by someone. Before he died, he called Ningbing. What he got in return was a cold, hung-up call. After his death, he arrived at the Naive Bridge. The Mengpo gave him a soup, but he couldn't forget his memories. He smiled bitterly and asked Mengpo, "Mengpo, isn't this soup watered down?" Mengpo sighed and said, "Your obsession is too deep. What exactly is it that you can't forget?" Fang Yuan closed his eyes. His body trembled slightly. He remembered their childhood together. He, Ningbing, and Chen Zi were childhood friends who grew up together. Clearly, both he and Chen Zi were Ningbing's closest friends. But Bai Ningbing only liked Chen Zi. She would stay with him for an entire day and a night when Chen Zi was sick. She would skip class and climb over the school wall just to watch his basketball game. Every time she looked at Chen Zi, her eyes were always full of endless love. Fang Yuan thought. He also wanted Ningbing to look at him the same way. So in order to attract her attention, he always intentionally went against her. Over time, the two of them slowly became sworn enemies. Later, Ningbing's grandmother forced her to marry Fang Yuan with the threat of death. Despite her resistance, Ningbing had no choice but to obey. She never understood why things turned out this way until their wedding night, when she accidentally discovered Fang Yuan's love diary filled with her name. It was then that she realized Fang Yuan liked her. So, she concluded that everything was Fang Yuan's plot. It was him who made her grandmother force the marriage. It was him who ruined her chance to marry the person she loved. From that moment on, she hated Fang Yuan deeply. But what she didn't know was, after her car accident, the doctor diagnosed that she might become her beloved Chen. Upon hearing this, immediately ran abroad. As for him, Fang Yuan, knowing if she would went to the hospital every day to take care of her. He would wipe her face, talk to her. And his grandmother was deeply moved by his genuine affection. She also didn't want Bai Ningbing to miss out on such a person who truly cared for her. That's why, when she woke up, she was immediately pressured to marry Fang Yuan. Several times, Fang Yuan wanted to tell her the truth. But every time he saw Bai Ningbing's eyes full of hatred, he couldn't bring himself to say a word. Those who can't forget someone from their past life cannot reincarnate. Mengpo shared his memories and sighed softly. Your obsession is not yet over, making it difficult for you to enter the cycle of reincarnation. I'll allow you to return to the human world for 5 days, as long as you can make Ningbing say one thing to you. I love you. This old woman will allow you to be reborn. If you can't do it, you'll have to let go of everything and reincarnate. Fang Yuan froze. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something. But Mengpo had already waved her sleeve. A gust of wind blew past, and Fang Yuan felt his vision darken. His consciousness began to blur again. When he opened his eyes once more, he found himself standing in the familiar villa. The floor was covered in blood, and his own lifeless body was lying there. Fang Yuan's heart trembled violently. He crouched down, his fingers trembling as he gently reached out to touch the familiar face. The coldness he felt made him quickly pull his hand back. It felt as if his throat was blocked by something, and even breathing became difficult. He spent a lifetime but never could make Ningbing say one word to him. I love you. Now, only 5 days were left. How could that even be possible? But deep in his heart, there was a faint voice struggling. What if she really would say those words? This wasn't the time for self-pity. He had to handle the situation in front of him first. He bent down, struggling to drag his own body. He moved step by step toward the wardrobe. The body was heavy, pressing down on him so much that it was hard to breathe. But he couldn't stop. He kept going until he stuffed the body into the wardrobe, closed the door, and let out a sigh of relief. Then, he fetched a bucket of water, knelt on the floor, and slowly began wiping the bloodstains on the ground. With each wipe, his heart ached as if it were being squeezed. Those bloodstains seemed to represent the scars between him and Xi Ningbing, indelibly etched in his memory. Just as he wiped away the last bloodstain, a cold and disdainful voice suddenly came from behind him. "Fang Yuan, what are you doing?" His body stiffened. Instantly, the cloth in his hand fell to the ground. He slowly turned his head and saw Xi Ningbing standing at the door. She was wearing a black floor-length silk dress. The design with a stand-up collar and a cinched waist made her look even more elegant and aloof. But her eyes were filled with disgust and impatience. Fang Yuan looked at her, feeling as if it had been a long, long time since they last met. His throat moved, but no sound came out, because Xi Ningbing wasn't alone. Behind her, Chen Zi followed. Chen Zi was wearing a pale-colored shirt. His hair was smooth, looking gentle and graceful. But when he saw Fang Yuan, his face instantly turned ashen. His eyes filled with terror. He even unconsciously took a few steps back, as if he had seen something terribly frightening. Though Fang Yuan hadn't seen Chen Zi in several years, it shouldn't have caused such a strong reaction from him. Chen Zi's behavior was so abnormal. Even Xi Ningbing noticed it. She feared Chen Zi might fall, and quickly reached out to steady him. She asked, "Chen Zi, what's wrong?" Chen Zi tightly gripped her arm, as if struggling to control his emotions, and said, "It's nothing. I just smelled blood, and it made me feel a little uncomfortable." Bai Ningbing immediately turned her head to look at Fang Yuan, and the disgust in her eyes increased as she said, "Fang Yuan, do you need to do something despicable every single day to feel comfortable? It's been 5 years. How much more do you want before you'll leave me alone?" Fang Yuan stood still, calmly looking at her. He spoke each word slowly. "If you want me to leave you alone, Bai Ningbing, just say one thing, I love you." His voice was soft, but it felt as if he had poured all his strength into it. His eyes were full of hope, but Bai Ningbing only sneered, a mocking curve at the corner of her mouth, as she said, "I love you? You think you deserve that?" Then, she turned to look at Chen Zi and said, "Chen Zi, I only love you." Chen Zi stood behind her, a flush rising to his face. "Xi Ningbing, please don't say that," Chen Zi said. "Fang Yuan will be hurt." But Xi Ningbing didn't care at all. She coldly replied, "If he had any shame, he wouldn't have forced me to marry him in the first place." After saying that, she grabbed Chen Zi's hand and said, "Don't mind him. I'll take you inside to choose a room." Fang Yuan felt as if his heart had been violently stabbed. The pain made it hard for him to breathe. He immediately stopped them. His voice was trembling. "What are you planning to do?" Bai Ningbing looked at him coldly. Her tone had no warmth. "Chen Zi just returned to the country, and his house is still being cleaned. He's staying here with us for now. Fang Yuan, don't try to play the man of the house here. Don't forget, if you hadn't used underhanded methods, he would be the one standing in your position now." Fang Yuan's face instantly turned ashen, as if he had been slapped across the face. Had this been before, Fang Yuan would have definitely argued back. But now, he just felt utterly exhausted. He could only watch helplessly as Xi Ningbing held Chen Zi's hand and walked past him, as if he were a complete stranger. At dinner, Xi Ningbing and Chen Zi sat together. Their actions were very intimate, as if Chen Zi were the real head of the household. The two of them whispered to each other, laughing every now and then. And Fang Yuan was completely ignored by them. Fang Yuan lowered his head, shoveling food into his mouth like a robot. But he couldn't taste anything. In his ears, the sounds of Xi Ningbing's cold laugh and Chen Zi's light chuckles kept echoing. His heart felt like it was being pierced by countless needles. The pain so intense it felt like he couldn't breathe. Until late at night, when he was about to sleep, Fang Yuan happened to see Chen Zi on the phone in the hallway. "I told you to kill him, didn't I? Why is he still standing here, perfectly fine?" Fang Yuan's heart sank to the bottom. The water cup in his hand instantly fell to the ground, making a sharp, crisp sound as it shattered. Chen Zi heard the sound and suddenly turned around. His face turned pale. "Was he the one you hired?" Fang Yuan's voice trembled. His eyes filled with disbelief. Chen Zi's lips moved, and he was about to speak when his peripheral vision caught something, and he suddenly pretended to fall to the ground, letting out a painful cry. Xi Ningbing heard the noise and immediately rushed over. When she saw what was happening, she was immediately furious. She pushed Fang Yuan away forcefully and shouted loudly, "What are you doing?" Chen Zi grabbed Xi Ningbing's hand and said, "Ningbing, don't blame him. It's probably because you made Fang Yuan really angry today. I don't mind suffering a little, as long as he can calm down." Hearing this, Bai Ningbing gave Fang Yuan a furious glance. Her eyes filled with anger, as if she were looking at an enemy. But in front of Chen Zi, she didn't dare to show it too obviously, fearing it might scare him. So she bent down to help Chen Zi up and gently said, "I'll take you to apply medicine first." Fang Yuan stood there, watching their backs, his heart full of bitterness. He returned to his room, took out the first aid kit, and quietly treated his wound. There was a bloodstain on his wrist, a result of being pushed away by Xi Ningbing earlier. When the medicine touched the wound, it stung sharply. But this pain was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. Just after treating the wound, Xi Ningbing pushed the door open and entered. Her face was dark, and her tone was full of questioning. "Isn't it unbearable for you to not stir up trouble every day?" Fang Yuan lifted his head. His eyes reddened as he looked at her and said, "Yes. What do you want to do with me?" Xi Ningbing didn't speak. Her gaze darkened, a dangerous glint flashing in her eyes. Fang Yuan knew what that look meant. It was the prelude to countless times of hatred, intertwining and erupting between them. Sure enough, the next second, she strode toward him, grabbed his collar, and violently kissed his lips. Her movements were rough, yet indifferent, as if Fang Yuan were just a tool for her to vent her anger. Fang Yuan winced in pain, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to make a sound. Her breath sprayed against his ear, her voice soft yet cold. "Fang Yuan, you will never have my love." Fang Yuan closed his eyes. Tears quietly fell. In the end, when it was almost over, his voice became hoarse and faint. "Bai Ningbing, I love you." Xi Ningbing's head buried in his neck. Her movements paused for a moment. Then she sneered and said, "But I hate you." After saying that, she stood up and walked toward the bathroom, leaving Fang Yuan alone. He felt completely cold. When Fang Yuan opened his eyes again, there was no one beside him. The first thought that came to his mind was not, "Wow, the weather is nice today," but instead, "There are only 4 days left." He felt like time was a sharp knife hanging above his head. It could fall at any moment, plunging him completely into an endless abyss. He lifted the blanket and walked to the bathroom. Cold water splashed onto his face, which helped him wake up a little. After leaving the room, he heard the faint sound of utensils clinking from the dining table. He followed the sound and saw Chen Zi sitting at the table having breakfast. When Chen Zi looked up and saw him, he smiled gently and said, "Fang Yuan, you're awake." Ningbing left. She was supposed to cancel her meeting today to accompany me to the auction. But I didn't want her to neglect the company because of me. I convinced her for a long time before she left. I'm in need of a companion. Why don't you come with me? Fang Yuan furrowed his brows, instinctively wanting to refuse. But it seemed like Chen Zi saw through his thoughts. He gently placed his coffee cup down and said, "If you don't come with me, then I'll call Ningbing and tell her that you intentionally pushed me down the stairs." Upon hearing this, Fang Yuan's fingers involuntarily tightened, his nails digging deep into his palm. He knew Chen Zi's methods, and he understood the trust Bai Ningbing had in him. If Chen Zi really said that, Zi Ningbing would surely believe him without hesitation, and he wouldn't have the time to explain, or the chance to argue. After all, he was still waiting for Zi Ningbing to say those words. "I love you." Now wasn't the time to argue with her. So, he nodded expressionlessly. "All right, I'll go with you." During the drive to the auction, Fang Yuan remained silent. Chen Zi sat beside him, occasionally glancing at his phone, with a faint smile on his lips. Suddenly, the car screeched to a halt. A black van had dashed out, blocking their way. Before they could react, several masked men rushed up, forcefully dragging them out of the car and shoving them into the van. Fang Yuan's vision went black, and all he could hear were Chen Zi's cries and the kidnapper's heavy breathing. He felt his wrists tightly bound with rough ropes, and the pain made him furrow his brows. The car bounced for a long time before finally stopping. They were dragged out of the VA and taken to an abandoned dock. The leader of the kidnappers took off his mask. He revealed a sinister face. Fang Yuan recognized him immediately. This person was Fu Qian, the president of the Fu Group, who had just been ruined by Bai Ningbing. "Fu Qian!" Fang Yuan furrowed his brows and asked, "What do you want?" Fu Qian sneered, his eyes filled with hatred. "What do I want? Bai Ningbing destroyed my family and my life. I want to make her lose everything she loves." Fang Yuan's heart sank suddenly as he said, "Fu Qian, calm down. There's still a way out." "Calm down?" Fu Qian suddenly raised his voice. "I can't calm down. Bai Ningbing ruined everything for me, and now I will destroy everything for her." After saying that, he waved his hand, and several kidnappers immediately shoved Chen Zi and Fang Yuan to the edge of the dock. Below them was the pitch-black sea, with waves crashing fiercely, like a giant mouth, ready to swallow everything. Fu Qian took out his phone and dialed Zi Ningbing's number. "Ms. Bai, your two men are in my hands now. I'll give you an hour. You can only choose one to take with you. The other one will be pushed into the sea. Remember, you can only choose one." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Zi Ningbing's cold voice came through. "Fu Qian, if you dare to harm them, I'll make you wish you were never born." Fu Qian laughed loudly. "Bai Ningbing, you're in no position to threaten me right now. I'll wait for you for an hour." He hung up the phone. Fang Yuan's heart was racing. He knew very well that Zi Ningbing would definitely choose Chen Zi, although he had long prepared himself for being abandoned by her. Even so, he couldn't help but feel a wave of bitterness in his heart. An hour later, Zi Ningbing appeared at the dock. Her gaze swept over Fang Yuan and Chen Zi, finally landing on Fu Qian. She said coldly, "Fu Qian, release them." Fu Qian sneered. "I already told you. You can only choose one. Choose quickly, there's not much time left." Zi Ningbing's gaze moved back and forth between Fang Yuan and Chen Zi. In the end, she coldly said, "I choose neither. Because I'm taking both of them. I won't give up either." Fang Yuan was stunned. Chen Zi's eyes widened, seeming unable to believe what he had just heard. "You hate me, don't you?" Fang Yuan couldn't help but speak, his voice trembling slightly. Zi Ningbing glanced at him coldly. "I do hate you, but at least right now, you are my husband. I'm not." Like you. Doing such a ruthless thing without caring about others' lives. Fang Yuan's heart felt as if it had been stabbed hard. The pain was intense. He opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Fu Qian was clearly enraged by Xi Ningbing's attitude. He suddenly shoved Chen Zi toward the edge of the cliff. Choose one. Otherwise, I'll push them both down. Xi Ningbing's gaze instantly turned cold. She stepped forward, her voice low and filled with threat. Fu Qian, if you dare lay a finger on them, I will make you wish you were never born. Just as the two sides were at a standoff, the sound of police sirens suddenly came from the distance. Fu Qian's expression changed. Clearly surprised that the police had arrived so quickly, he gritted his teeth and, disregarding everything, took a knife and lunged toward Xi Ningbing's heart. By Ningbing, Fang Yuan almost acted on instinct. Without thinking, he lunged forward and stood in front of Xi Ningbing. The blade stabbed into his shoulder, and blood immediately stained his clothes. He grunted in pain, his body collapsing weakly to the ground. Xi Ningbing caught him, a flash of panic in her eyes. Fang Yuan's consciousness gradually blurred. He could only hear Xi Ningbing's anxious voice. He wanted to speak, but couldn't make a sound. Finally, he sank into complete darkness. When he woke up again, Fang Yuan found himself lying by the pool. Xi Ningbing stood in front of him, her eyes full of hatred. Fang Yuan, why did you play along with the kidnappers? Do you think this will make me say, I love you? Fang Yuan froze, completely confused about what she was saying. Xi Ningbing continued. Chen Zi told me everything. This kidnapping was planned by you and Fu Qian together, just to make him get hurt. Fang Yuan, how could you be so cruel? Fang Yuan's heart sank, and he finally understood. Chen Zi must have used some trick, making Xi Ningbing believe that it was all his plot. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. Before he could finish explaining, Xi Ningbing gave him a cold look. I know you're reckless. You like doing things to go against me just to get my attention. But you can hurt anyone. But you can't touch Chen Zi. He's my life. She had people bind Fang Yuan to a stone and sink him into the pool. By Ningbing, it wasn't me. The cold water instantly submerged his body. The stone dragged him quickly to the bottom of the pool. His breathing became increasingly difficult. The world around him slowly blurred. Just as he was about to suffocate, Xi Ningbing ordered her men to pull him up. But before he could catch his breath, he was pushed back down again. This went on over and over. Fang Yuan felt like he wanted to die. He didn't know how many times he had been sunk. Finally, soaked and barely alive, he was dragged to the shore like a dying fish. Xi Ningbing crouched down, holding his chin. Her voice was as cold as ice. Fang Yuan, you'd better remember this. If you hurt Chen Zi again, the account between us won't be so simple to settle. After saying that, she turned and walked away with a group of bodyguards. Even looking at Fang Yuan again. Asterisk on the third day, Fang Yuan received an invitation to a dinner party. It was hosted by a mutual friend within their circle, inviting him and Xi Ningbing to attend together. Xi Ningbing stood at the door, wearing a dark-colored mermaid-style evening gown, which made her appear even more noble and aloof. However, standing next to her was Chen Zi. Chen Zi wore a perfectly tailored suit, and Xi Ningbing was holding his arm, looking as though he was the one accompanying her. Fang Yuan's steps suddenly stopped. He looked at Xi Ningbing, a flash of pain crossing his eyes, but he quickly hid the painful expression. He curled his lips into a cold smile and said, So, this is how it is. You're taking Mr. Chen to the dinner. Xi Ningbing shot him a cold glare, and without hiding her disgust, said, Chen Zi is my partner. Do you have a problem with that? Fang Yuan's hand tightened into a fist, his nails nearly digging into his palm. He thought to himself, how could she do this? But he said out loud, No problem. Just reminding you, We're still not divorced, and you're taking another man to a dinner. Aren't you afraid of what others will say? Zi Ningbing sneered. Fang Yuan, do you think I care about what others think? You're nothing but a decoration. Don't think too highly of yourself. After saying that, she turned and walked away with Chen Zi, sparing Fang Yuan another glance. Fang Yuan stood there, watching their figures disappear into the distance. A wave of indescribable bitterness surged in his heart. Upon arriving at the venue for the dinner, the lights dazzled, and the guests were all gathered together. As soon as Zi Ningbing and Chen Zi appeared, all eyes were drawn to them. Bai Ningbing seemed to be doing this on purpose to embarrass Fang Yuan. At the banquet, she was especially close to Chen Zi. She peeled shrimp for him, poured him wine, and whispered to him in his ear. This caused the guests around them to start whispering. I heard that Ms. Bai and Fang Yuan are a pair of sworn enemy spouses. It seems like it's true. Just look how gentle Ms. Bai is with Mr. Chen. She doesn't even spare a glance at Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan is so pitiful. Even though he's the legitimate husband, he looks like an outsider. Listening to these whispers, Fang Yuan felt as if his heart was being sliced by a knife. He gripped his glass tightly, the joints of his fingers turning white. But he didn't walk up to them. He thought to himself, the more I show that I care, the more pleased Zi Ningbing will be. However, things didn't end there. Halfway through the banquet, Chen Zi suddenly stood up, saying he needed to go to the restroom. Zi Ningbing looked at him gently and nodded, watching him leave. But not long after, Chen Zi rushed back in a panic, his face flushed unusually, his eyes holding back tears. Ningbing, help me! He collapsed into Zi Ningbing's arms, his voice trembling as he said, just now in the restroom, Fang Yuan, he arranged for someone to drug me. As soon as he spoke these words, the entire banquet hall erupted. All eyes turned to Fang Yuan. The gazes were full of shock, disdain, and even a sense of schadenfreude. My God, Fang Yuan actually did something like that? Has he gone mad? How dare he do something to Chen Zi? Ms. Bai will definitely not let him off. Sure enough, Zi Ningbing immediately stood up, her gaze slicing through Fang Yuan like a knife. She grabbed a glass from the table and threw it hard to the ground. The glass shattered into pieces, and the wine spilled, staining the carpet red. Fang Yuan, what did I tell you last time? If you dare touch Chen Zi again, I won't let you go. Fang Yuan stood still. He calmly looked at her, but his voice carried a trace of mockery as he said, I didn't touch him. Bai Ningbing's expression darkened even further. She strode up to Fang Yuan and sternly said, do you really think he would make up such a thing to frame you? Besides, you've always been a habitual offender. Fang Yuan's fingertips trembled slightly. A flash of pain crossed his eyes. He lifted his head, his voice hoarse and filled with despair as he said, what do you want me to do then? Kneel down. Apologize to Chen Zi. Fang Yuan's pupils constricted sharply. His hands clenched into fists. He felt his pride being crushed, stepped on and ground into the dirt. He gritted his teeth and spoke each word slowly. It's impossible. I, Fang Yuan, only kneel to heaven, to the earth, and to my parents. To kneel to anyone else, that is absolutely impossible. After saying that, he turned to leave, but Zi Ningbing's expression had darkened to the extreme. She took a large step forward and kicked him in the knee. Fang Yuan, unprepared, fell heavily to the ground, kneeling on the floor. Zi Ningbing's voice carried an unquestionable tone of command, and Fang Yuan felt his pride being shattered bit by bit. His pride was being torn apart slowly. He looked up with red eyes and said, I told you. I didn't do it. Bai Ningbing sneered and gestured for the bodyguards behind her. Two bodyguards stepped forward, pressing down on Fang Yuan's shoulders. They forced him to bow his head. Fang Yuan struggled, But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't overcome their strength. His forehead slammed heavily against the ground, making a dull thud. The murmurs around them grew louder, like countless knives stabbing at his heart. Look! Fang Yuan finally got what he deserved. Miss Bai is ruthless. She didn't even leave him any face. He deserves it. He always bullies Chen Zi. Fang Yuan, are you still not admitting your mistake? Zi Ningbing's voice held a hint of impatience. Fang Yuan felt his pride was completely shattered. A sense of indescribable despair surged in his heart. He gathered all his strength and forcefully broke free from the bodyguard's grip. He stood up and raised his hand, slapping Zi Ningbing's face with all his might. The crisp sound of the slap was especially jarring in the quiet, silent banquet hall. Bai Ningbing! His voice cracked with emotion. Tears finally broke free from his eyes. I told you I didn't do it. Is it only what he says that is right? Everything I say is wrong? You love him so much, but I'm your husband. What am I even? His voice was full of despair and pain, as if he was trying to release all the grievances and unwillingness he had inside. This was the first time he cried in front of Zi Ningbing, and the first time he showed his vulnerability to her. Zi Ningbing froze. She had never seen this side of Fang Yuan before. He had always been so stubborn, ever showing weakness. But now, he was like a small beast pushed into a corner. His eyes filled with hopelessness and pain. A strange emotion suddenly surged in her heart, as if something inside her was quietly collapsing. She opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. Fang Yuan looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. His voice was hoarse and desperate as he said, Bai Ningbing, remember this. Fang Yuan, have never owed you anything. After saying that, he turned and walked briskly out of the banquet hall. Zi Ningbing stood frozen. The sharp pain on her face snapped her back to reality. She watched Fang Yuan's retreating back, a strange, indescribable feeling rising in her chest. The next day. It was the anniversary of Fang Yuan's parents' death. Fang Yuan woke up early, dressed in simple black clothes, and prepared to go out and pay his respects to his parents. But just as he reached the door, Zi Ningbing called him. I'll go with you. Fang Yuan's steps came to a sudden halt. He turned around, coldly glaring at Zi Ningbing, wondering what she was trying to do now. He coldly replied, What? You want to have the bodyguards hold me down so I can bow to Chen Zi? Zi Ningbing's expression instantly turned cold. She had initially wanted to ease the tension between them, but Fang Yuan's attitude brought the anger she had just suppressed back up. Yesterday, you were clearly in the wrong, and you're still dragging things on, aren't you? Fang Yuan sneered, shoving her aside and walking straight out the door. However, when he reached the car, he found that Chen Zi was sitting in the passenger seat, wearing a warm smile as he looked at him. Fang Yuan, Ningbing said she wanted to go pay respects to your parents, so I wanted to join her. Fang Yuan was immediately consumed by anger. He quickly turned around and glared at Zi Ningbing. He was both furious and upset as he thought, how can she be so inconsiderate? He shouted, Bai Ningbing, this is my bottom line. He cannot go to pay respects. Bai Ningbing frowned and said, Fang Yuan, don't go too far. Chen Zi is doing this out of kindness. Don't be ungrateful. Kindness? Fang Yuan's eyes were filled with sarcasm. He thought to himself, Zi Ningbing is utterly unreasonable. He said out loud, Bai Ningbing, have you forgotten? Today is the anniversary of my parents' death. OT your romantic getaway. Chen Zi sighed and said, Fang Yuan, why do you hate me so much? Didn't we have a good relationship before? Why do you always go against me? Fang Yuan sneered, his gaze icy as he looked at Chen Zi. Thinking to himself, how dare you play the innocent? He said, why do I hate you? You know it better than anyone. Ningbing couldn't take it anymore and grabbed his wrist, pulling him into the car. Fang Yuan, stop being unreasonable. Get in the car. Fang Yuan struggled, but he couldn't break free from her grip. The car quickly made its way to the cemetery. Fang Yuan didn't want to see the two of them, so he grabbed the chrysanthemums and walked quickly to his parents' tombstone. He knelt down, gently placing the flowers in front of the tombstone. His fingers brushed against the cold stone, a flash of pain crossing his eyes. He silently said in his heart, "Mom, Dad, I'm here to visit you." Ningbing must have followed him without him noticing, standing behind him, looking at the tombstone with a complex expression. "Mom, Dad, although I don't like Fang Yuan, I'll take care of him for the rest of my life." Fang Yuan's body went stiff. After a long while, he gritted his teeth and said, "I don't need that. You just need to say one thing: I love you." Ningbing's face instantly turned cold. "No, Fang Yuan, don't push your luck. I've told you before. I'll never love you." Fang Yuan's heart felt as though it had been stabbed. The pain was overwhelming, but he didn't say anything more. After the ceremony, Ningbing turned and walked away with Chen Zi. Fang Yuan couldn't bring himself to leave and stood in front of the tomb for a while longer. He quietly spoke to his parents. He wasn't sure how long it had been, but just as he was about to leave, a staff member stopped him. Fang Yuan frowned, a bad feeling rising in his chest. He asked, "What's going on?" The staff member lowered his head. There was a hint of guilt in his voice. "Actually, your parents' ashes were scattered by Mr. Chen." Fang Yuan's pupils contracted sharply. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "What did you say?" The staff member sighed and said, "A few days ago, Mr. Chen forced us to dig up your parents' ashes. We disagreed, but he threatened us. He said he was someone Ms. Ningbing cared about. If we didn't listen to him, the Z family would make sure we didn't have it easy. We had no choice but to follow his orders. But we felt guilty, so we decided to tell you." Fang Yuan felt as though his mind had gone blank. By the time he regained his senses, he was already rushing out of the cemetery. After a brief moment of panic, he headed straight for the club where Ningbing and Chen Zi were. Inside the club, the lights were dim, and the music was deafening. As Fang Yuan rushed into the private room, he saw Ningbing and Chen Zi sitting on the sofa, playing a game of truth or dare. Chen Zi had lost, and according to the rules, he had to kiss Ningbing. Chen Zi lowered his head and slowly leaned in towards Ningbing, just as his lips were about to touch hers. Fang Yuan rushed over, grabbed a bottle of wine from the table, and slammed it down onto Chen Zi's head. The bottle shattered with a forceful crack. Chen Zi let out a grunt, falling to the floor, blood pouring from his forehead. The people around them screamed in shock, and nearly everyone was too stunned to react. Only Ningbing stood up, raising her hand and slapping Fang Yuan across the face. "Fang Yuan, are you crazy?" Blood trickled from the corner of Fang Yuan's mouth, but it was as if he didn't feel the pain as he said, "I am crazy. The one who's truly insane is him. Do you know what he did to my parents?" Ningbing's expression immediately darkened, and she said coldly, "Your parents are already dead. What more could he have done?" "His ashes ... Fang Yuan's voice trembled, tears uncontrollably streaming down his face. "He scattered my parents' ashes." Ningbing froze for a moment, and a trace of shock flashed in her eyes. However, Chen Zi was crying, his face covered in tears, his voice full of grievance. "I didn't." "Fang Yuan, why are you framing me?" Ningbing, as if remembering something, her face turned cold again, and she said, "Has your method of framing and slandering become so low level now? How much my mom loved Chen Zi since he was little. How could he possibly do something like this? You just saw us about to kiss outside. And now you're purposely looking for trouble, right? Fang Yuan, I'm telling you. Don't say that Chen Zi and I didn't kiss. Even if we did. If you dare touch him, I won't let you off. Fang Yuan stood still. His eyes filled with tears. He looked at Zi Ningbing, who was tightly protecting Chen Zi. Suddenly, he tilted his head and laughed. As he laughed, tears streamed down his face. By Ningbing, you're really stupid. I'm stupid too, and so it's destined that we'll both lose the ones we love forever. After saying that, he laughed loudly and turned to leave. His back looked so thin, yet so resolute. Asterisk the last day. Fang Yuan still hadn't heard Zi Ningbing say those words. I love you. He calmly took a knife in his hand and went up to the rooftop of the tallest building in the city center. Then he sent by Ningbing the address of where he was. After sending the message, he threw his phone aside and quietly waited. The news he wanted soon spread throughout the city. The media rushed in like a swarm of bees, surrounding the building tightly. Everyone looked up at the figure standing on the edge of the rooftop. People began to whisper, I heard he's the husband of the president of the Z Group. Why would he suddenly think this way? Who knows? There are too many grudges in high society. Maybe he was pushed to the brink. Why hasn't Mizzy come yet? If she doesn't come soon, something really bad is going to happen. Finally, Zi Ningbing arrived. She pushed through the crowd and rushed to the rooftop. Her face was terrifyingly dark. She looked at Fang Yuan. Her voice filled with suppressed anger as she said, What the hell are you doing? Did you see me with Chen Zi at the hospital? And now you're deliberately making trouble? Don't forget. Last night, it was you who smashed his head. Fang Yuan slowly turned around, his gaze calm as he looked at her and said, If you want me to say I love you, then either watch me die. Zi Ningbing froze, then sneered and said, Fang Yuan, are you crazy? Do you think that by doing this, you can force me to submit? The knife in his hand was still pressed against his chest. A trace of impatience flashed in Zi Ningbing's eyes. She coldly said, Fine, I'll say it. Fang Yuan, in this life, the next life, and the life after that, I will never love you. Are you satisfied now? You can jump. A flash of pain crossed Fang Yuan's eyes, but it was quickly hidden. He gave a soft smile. The knife in his hand clattered as it fell to the ground. He calmly stepped away from the edge of the rooftop and stood in front of Zi Ningbing. Zi Ningbing looked at him, feeling an inexplicable sense of relief in her heart. She coldly smiled, saying, I knew you wouldn't jump. Fang Yuan shook his head and said, Zi Ningbing, you don't understand. It doesn't matter whether I jump or not, because I've already given up. Zi Ningbing frowned, about to say something, when her phone suddenly rang. She answered the call. On the other end of the line was Chen Zi's weak voice. Ningbing, I'm in so much pain. Can you come and be with me? Zi Ningbing's face immediately softened. I'll come right away. She hung up the phone, gave Fang Yuan a cold glance, then turned and walked away. Without any hesitation, Fang Yuan stood on the rooftop, watching Zi Ningbing's figure slowly disappear. His heart was calm, as if all the pain and obsessio had vanished without a trace in that moment. He turned and left the rooftop, heading to the law firm. At the law firm, Fang Yuan sat at the desk, holding a pen in his hand. In front of him was a divorce agreement. He signed his name, then handed the agreement to the lawyer for the other copy. Please send it to Bai Ningbing. After leaving, Fang Yuan returned to the villa. He walked into the living room, took out a dark-colored suit from the wardrobe, and gently placed it on the sofa. Then he took out a piece of paper, writing a few lines on it. Bai Ningbing, actually, I've been dead for a long time. These 5 days were just extra time given to me by Meng Po. She said, If you said I love you, I could live again. But you didn't. So I'm dead now. And I don't love you anymore. You should just love Chenzi. From now on, you'll never see me again. After finishing, he placed the note beside the suit, then quietly sat on the sofa, closing his eyes. Soon, his body began to grow transparent. And finally, he turned into spakes of starlight, dispersing into the air. At the Naih Bridge, Fang Yuan stood once again in front of Mang Po.